think Jordan Peterson, I haven't followed him in a really long time, but he always liked to say a version of this. And you see a lot of people say something along the lines of like how pathetic it is for people to pride themselves on the accomplishments of their ancestors instead of like their own achievements or whatever. And I was always just, for one, I think that's ignorant, but also I find it kind of like offensively stupid, because, the idea that you can hang your hat on what little you might do in your individual life and that should somehow be a point of pride for you, that transcends like your membership in these things that are larger and longer lasting than yourself. Taking pride in those things seems to me a much more legitimate form of pride and satisfaction, a greater sense of meaning than, I got a promotion at my job or whatever, and I think that's how people did find meaning, especially people who were, I think, you see like elites, people who, Elon Musk can derive meaning from the fact that he's shooting rockets into space, and he's the richest man in the world and like whatever. And at lower levels of like elite and elite aspirant behavior, you get some of that same sort of mentality. But for people who are, down the middle and the bottom, they take their meaning. We take our meaning like where we can find it, and these stubborn attachments of nation and family and place and religion and all of these things are the basis of people's meaning in their lives. And so when the state embarks on that project to sort of delegitimize all those things, in the name of, having, I guess, a more openness so that you can operate your state at a larger scale or whatever, they, at the same time, we're taking away the basis of meaning for the majority of the population. And this is being done again by elites who really couldn't see like why people were so attached to those things in the first place, like Obama talking about these people are attached to their guns and their Bibles, he could have said like it would have meant the same thing. He could have said they're attached to their American flags and their Bibles, those poor people down there. And that's the mentality, I think, of the decision makers, because again, they have other things that they're proud of other than the fact that they're Americans or they're part of this, long tradition of Christianity or come from a good family or something. You see it when you go to DC. I'm sure you've been there. Like it always cracks me up. You go down to the National Mall area and walk around and you see people, who work in like the Department of Agriculture probably or something, but you walk all down every street and you look at the faces of people, you got the Washington Monument there and the Capitol's there, and they're walking down the sidewalk to go to work at the Department of Agriculture. And they are so pleased with themselves. I mean, they think they are so awesome, just I'm walking by the Washington Monument on the way to work at and they're so happy with themselves. And so, you could take people like that who don't feel like they need any of those other things. They're probably wrong. They'll find out the hard way one day that they are wrong and they're going to be just as alienated as everybody else. But those are the people who shape our policies and impose this on the rest of us. And, it's kind of natural that, like Peterson would say something like that to sort of ridicule and mock people for subscribing to like racialism. That's what he's talking about. But there's really no argument or no reason you can't take his argument that you shouldn't take pride in like, the achievements of larger collectives you're a part of. There's no reason you can't take that argument and apply it to everything. You can delegitimize patriotism with that. You can delegitimize faith, anything, because, well, okay, that's nice, but what have you done? Or how does it harm you personally, And that's kind of what's been done.
Yeah, I think most conservatives don't recognize the civilizational acid that is liberalism when they see it. So you're exactly right to point out that that Peterson is only echoing a conservative talking point that's been around for a long time, right? Simultaneously, we should take great pride in the founding fathers and our founding documents and being American. But also, we should have no pride in our previous achievements, our heritage, any of these things. It's all individual accomplishment. Obviously, those things can't be simultaneously true, but we're asked to act as if they are. And Peterson is regularly bringing up archetypal stories that are founded deep in our subconscious because of our heritage, because of our lineage, our language, our shared cultures, and yet rejects pride in those things, even though he believes they can ultimately define us. And I think a lot of this comes from the failed conservative attempt to juxtapose individualism and collectivism as if they are some kind of differentiated force, which of course is insane. And a lot of it also comes after the kind of the post-war consensus problem, right? Like there's a reason that it's really important. If you've noticed recently, everyone's scoffing at the great men of history thing again. Like this has entered the discourse yet again, that we're not allowed to have great men of history. Someone was asking me on a Twitter space recently, like, why don't we do that? Like, why don't we study the great men anymore? Why don't we have classical educations? Why don't we attempt to learn Latin and Greek so we can have this continuity of civilization and understand, kind of the context in which our great works are rendered? And the answer is because we needed to sever ourselves from all previous human civilizations in order to kind of create the highly atomized existence we have today. We wanted to get rid of the strong gods. We wanted weak bonds. We wanted economic bonds. We wanted bonds of ideology. We didn't want bonds of heritage. We didn't want bonds of religion. We didn't want bonds that drove men towards the great passions, because great and terrible things sit behind those bonds, right? The worst atrocities in the world and the greatest feats and endeavors of the world all sit, but kind of behind those forces. And so I think that that's why ultimately we have been encouraged, and I doubt you would sit down with someone at the Department of Education like, oh no, we're going with trends and forces history because it gets rid of possible great men, right? But ultimately I think that is kind of the driver, is when we wanted pacified civilizations in which these great spirits that could animate human action were banished, right? And I think that's why we did it with history. I think that's why we did it with the way that we create our governments, the way that we encourage people to think about their identity and their spiritual structures and everything else. Religion, we have to disinvest from it. Heritage, we have to disinvest from it. The idea that great men can drive history, it all has to go, because if these things exist, well, then history is an existential struggle. It's not over. It's not solved. Great powers are moving any moment. The metaphysical animating spirit of any given civilization could drive it to great or terrible things. And so I think that's why we see the interest in kind of defanging all of these disciplines and all of these motivations, because ultimately they're dangerous to the status quo as we understand it.